If you're an astrologer, diviner, healer, or just somebody with a strong connection to the spiritual dimensions of reality, then I think 2026 could be your year, but only if you're ready to seize the opportunity for service to others that it's going to offer. Because this year is filled with both peril and promise. The first half of the year looks rough, quite frankly, not least because there are harbingers of war on the horizon. But 2026 also has another side. There's the potential for something much more positive, something almost magical to take shape this year. And if you're already living in a magical cosmos, then you're well ahead of the curve. In this video, I'm going to take you through some of the things I'm seeing in 2026 and tell you why I think, for many of you watching, it could be one of the most significant years of your life. This is World Astrology Report. I'm your host, Dan Waits, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. Right now, we're watching the emergence of a multipolar world, one where power isn't monopolized by the West, but shared more evenly among the civilizations of the planet. Some states are rising, others are losing influence. But unfortunately, this kind of shift never passes without contention. And honestly, the first thing I'm seeing in 2026, particularly in the early months of the year, are war signals. And one place that seems to be particularly implicated is Russia. Donald Trump has been attempting to do a peace deal with Vladimir Putin to end the Ukraine war. The Europeans, for their own reasons, are strongly opposed to this. Whether that's a real split or some kind of theater, I'm not sure. Trump is a Leo rising Gemini sun with a talent for stagecraft and show business. And he's a master of saying one thing and doing another. And we're living through the final months of Neptune's transit through Pisces, which has, since 2011, brought us an age of illusion, one in which the image and its manipulation was everything. So I think it's worth being cautious about trusting any narratives at all right now, never mind those coming from official sources. Now, to be clear, I think Trump could succeed at making a deal. I wouldn't be surprised if there was news to that effect in early January, perhaps even resulting from a direct meeting between Trump and Putin. But I'm pretty sure that even if Trump does make a deal in the coming weeks, it isn't going to hold. Because looking at the astrology of the first few months of 2026, there are many factors that speak to the potential for an escalation of the war in Ukraine. Let's look at them one by one. On January the 26th, Neptune moves back into Aries for good. Aries is the sign of Mars, the war planet, and historical transits of Neptune through Aries have coincided with extremely bloody wars, notably the US Civil War, and one cycle before that, the War of the Spanish Succession. Neptune governs the popular mood, ideals, and cultural trends. And with Neptune in Aries, there is, on the positive side, a collective impulse to pioneer, to be one's unique self, and to forge a new path in the world. But Aries is an aggressive martial sign, and with the planet of the collective mood in that sign, an astrologer would be foolish to rule out a contentious and warlike climate over the coming years. Now, right as Neptune moves into Aries, in late January, we'll also see a conjunction of Mars and Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. These are reliably violent conjunctions that come around roughly every 2 years. Mars is the war planet, Pluto is the planet of power, life and death situations, and rebirth. And I'm pretty sure that this conjunction is speaking to events that implicate Russia. I have several natal charts for Russia, and all of them have important chart factors in these early degrees of Aquarius. My suspicion is that this conjunction is pointing to an expansion of the Ukraine war somehow, probably involving NATO. That might be as a result of something the Russians are accused of doing. What's more, on February the 14th, Saturn moves into Aries too. Happy Valentine's Day, friends. Saturn adds a sense of importance, pressure and weight wherever you find him in the zodiac. And in Aries, he brings that weight to the martial realm of action, assertion, self-discovery, sovereignty, and conflict. What could Saturn in Aries bring? Well, we don't need to guess, because in 2025, we already had a preview of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Saturn joined Neptune in Aries on May the 25th of 2025. We had several months where both planets were in that sign. Immediately after Saturn's Aries ingress, we saw a strong surge in intensity in the war in Ukraine. Russia launched one of its biggest ever attacks on the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, and it came out that Putin's own helicopter had been attacked by Ukrainian drones in an attempt to assassinate the Russian leader. But that wasn't all. Just after Saturn entered Aries, the simmering political conflict in the US ratcheted up to a new level. Protests in Los Angeles against Trump's crackdown on illegal migrants turned violent, and Trump sent in the National Guard to quell them at the objections of the state of California. Suddenly, there were headlines everywhere about civil war coming to the US, a split between state and federal governments, as in 1861. I think those events in the US and in Russia and Ukraine and elsewhere were foreshadowings. They were showing us what we're going to get in 2026 in larger helpings when Saturn returns to Aries next year. But that's not all. In mid-February, we'll see the first eclipse in Aquarius for many years, and that eclipse looks like it has big implications for Donald Trump. If you're enjoying this video so far, then please do click the like button down there and register your approval of this content. And please do subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you get alerts from YouTube when I drop new videos. Only if you want to, obviously. On February the 17th, we'll see a solar eclipse in Aquarius. This will be the first time we've seen an eclipse in Aquarius since 2020, when the great triplicity shift, the move from an age of Earth to an age of air, was completed. What ushered in that transition was the first conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius in more than 600 years. The shift into a new elemental age brings geopolitical change. Some states rise, others fall. We're clearly seeing it now, and I think we're going to see an acceleration of that process as eclipses move into Aquarius. This Aquarius eclipse is going to feel quite disruptive and divisive. The closest aspecting traditional planet will be the war planet Mars. But the eclipse will also be in a tight square to Uranus, the planet of sudden, surprising, shocking change. And Uranus will be conjunct the violent fixed star Algol, pretty close to where it was in July 2024 when Trump was allegedly almost shot by a sniper. Algol, the Medusa's head, brings decapitations. The February eclipse is closely dialed into Trump's chart, right on his descendant, suggesting it will have to do with facing off against his enemies. And another theme that this eclipse could bring to the fore is nuclear technology. The nuclear age began in 1942 with the first nuclear fission experiment in Chicago. That gives us this chart for the nuclear age. The lunar nodes, extremely sensitive points on any chart, are at 28 Leo and 28 Aquarius. So the eclipse is directly triggering this chart. And it may put the themes of nuclear power or nuclear weapons front and center in this part of the year. And then, as if that wasn't enough, in April of 2026, we get a conjunction of Mars and Saturn, which come every 2 years and initiate new cycles of sustained challenge. This one's coming in Aries, so that's yet another Aries and Mars activation. It's coming at 7 degrees of that sign. And the weird thing is that almost every major geopolitical player that you can think of has important chart placements close to or opposing that degree. NATO, the UK, Germany, France, Russia, China, Taiwan, India, Iran, they're all activated by this conjunction. In my last forecast episode, I talked about how early December, when Mars and Saturn formed their last square of the current cycle, would show us where things were heading. And now in early December, we've just seen the failure of peace talks between the US and Russia, NATO reportedly considering preemptive action against Russia, and Putin saying Russia is ready for war with Europe. That's not a good omen. Are we looking at the outbreak of World War III? Well, I've come to believe that the phrase World War III isn't very helpful. It makes us think that whatever's coming is going to look something like the first two world wars, with two sides facing off against each other. But I doubt it will look like that. We're in an age of air now, and that changes the style of conflict. It makes it more diffuse, and war becomes more about the spirit, about ideas, about the air. But holding and taking territory will obviously remain part of the game, as it must. In a recent interview, the investor and geopolitical forecaster Martin Armstrong, who has a computerized geopolitical prediction system with a very good track record, said that his system was saying World War III was coming in 2026, but that it wouldn't look like how you think it would. Instead, it looked like more of a contagion that spreads around the world. Yes, I know this stuff is depressing and more than a little scary, but forewarned is forearmed. But what does any of it have to do with mystics, astrologers, and healers? Well, during difficult times, scary times. People look to spiritual practitioners for guidance. They search for reassurance and comfort, whether that's more clarity on what's coming for them and their families, or just to gain a sense of connection to spirit and purpose. For a few years now, I've been seeing that the charts of clients who do that kind of work are lighting up in 2026 and 2027, like they're going to come into their purpose. So I think in 2026, if you're involved in that kind of work, you're going to find that more people need you. They'll need your wisdom, your compassion, and your ability to guide them closer to spiritual truth. But that's not all, because I think 2026 also has a much stranger and more inspiring side to it. The astrology of 2026 is genuinely nuts for at least two major reasons. The first of them is a conjunction of Saturn and Neptune coming on February the 20th of 2026. The combination of Saturn and Neptune brings a thinning of the veil. The unreal, the imaginal, the spectral all become more real, just as the solid things we usually rely on become less so. You may have had a sense over the past year that structures in your life that used to be solid have started to dissolve, and there's no obvious way forward. That's the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and it's telling you that not knowing the way forward is where you're supposed to be right now. But out there in the world, these conjunctions can bring some genuinely strange happenings. Saturn and Neptune met in 1917, also a time of disillusion, when the miracle of Fatima happened, just as the First World War was raging. 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, had a series of apparent encounters with the Virgin Mary, which culminated in the so-called miracle of the sun, when the sun appeared to dance in the sky in front of an audience of 70,000 astonished witnesses. At another of these conjunctions in 1952, there was a mass sighting of UFOs over Washington, D.C. over 2 weekends in a row, the famous Saucers over Washington incident. Equally strange happenings could be in the post in 2026. And then in the middle of the year, we see some truly remarkable astrology. We see an incredible configuration of planets with Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries, and Pluto in Aquarius, forming what's called a minor grand trine. The configuration is coming in fire and air signs, which are active, outwardly oriented signs. I think this configuration will bring some remarkable new knowledge into the world, or perhaps the rediscovery of old knowledge. The configuration in July represents major moments in 2 synodic cycles, the Uranus-Neptune cycle and the Pluto-Neptune cycle. Both of these cycles have to do with the UFO phenomenon and efforts to define what it is. We've already seen some extremely important movement in this area in 2025, with the remarkable studies of Dr. Beatrice Villarroel and her team, who may well have proved the existence of a network of objects in orbit around the Earth before the Sputnik launch in 1957. For more on this, see this video. And right now, with the launch of the movie Age of Disclosure, we're seeing a faction of intelligence and defense figures pushing for some kind of disclosure of the existence of UFOs. In accord with their professions, their line is that UFOs represent a potential national security threat. I struggle to believe that myself, just because I suspect that if powerful beings in UFOs had wanted to invade the Earth, and so on, they would have done it easily a long time ago. But it doesn't matter so much. In my opinion, any kind of official opening on this subject throws the doors open to many more questions and an impulse to explore the implication of this phenomenon. Anyone who studies UFOs deeply comes to understand that it's fundamentally a phenomenon of consciousness as well as nuts and bolts. And so ultimately, I think this will push humanity towards a broader perspective on the cosmos and the beings that inhabit it, including in a spiritual sense. I think we're going to move towards a more widespread understanding that humanity really isn't the only intelligent species here on Earth, and that there are spiritual influences on humanity that most people aren't currently aware of. And there's more. I think that the coming spiritual renaissance will include a better understanding of humanity's true past. And there's a single word for that: Atlantis. If you're keeping up with the zeitgeist, it's pretty clear that the dominant narrative of humanity's history is being swept away as more and more people recognize that advanced civilization must be far older than the Academy currently insists. Earlier in 2025, we saw some extremely exciting developments around Egypt after a team of researchers used satellite data to circumvent long-standing gatekeeping at Giza to generate images of massive structures beneath the Khafra pyramid. That new information appeared just as Neptune moved into Aries for the first time in about 165 years, marking the beginning of a new cycle for Neptunian themes of faith and belief. That's what we call an omen, friends. From May 2026, we'll have Neptune in Aries, Pluto in Aquarius, and Uranus in Gemini, once again forming a minor grand trine, which represents a powerful wave of fire and air energy that will express itself in the world in the coming years. We already had a taste of this astrology in 2025, but Neptune was conjunct Saturn, which I think has put a bit of a dampener on our ability to feel excited about the moment. That won't be so true as we reach the middle months of 2026, when Saturn will have moved up to 10 degrees from Neptune. And here's where this gets really interesting. There's an intriguing eclipse coming on August the 12th of 2026 at 20 degrees of Leo. It could be in effect weeks and weeks earlier than that. One of the many interesting things about this eclipse is that if you look at the asteroids that are closely conjunct or opposing the eclipse degree, among others, you have Isis, Osiris, Neith, and Nut. They're all major deities in ancient Egyptian religion. What's more, the eclipse is conjunct the asteroid Hermes, who brings to mind the figure of Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary writer of the Hermetica, and a fusion of the Greek messenger god Hermes with Thoth, the Egyptian equivalent. And so I think this eclipse is highlighting ancient Egyptian spirituality and wisdom, which is the source of so much of our occult knowledge today. What's more, there's something interesting about the degree of this eclipse, 20 Leo. Several major spiritual teachers of the 19th and 20th centuries have major placements at this degree, or very close, including Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, Sri Aurobindo, and Edgar Cayce. All of these figures spoke of humanity's ancient past, by which I mean, yes, Atlantis. What it all means is a difficult question to answer, but I suspect we're going to see events and discoveries that fuel some sort of spiritual revival and a rediscovery of humanity's true history. And again, that could be where you come in, because you're almost certainly far ahead of the curve when it comes to immersion in spirituality and grasping the spiritual dimensions of life on Earth. I think a lot of quote-unquote normies are going to become far more curious about these topics and will need help coming to understand them better. They're going to need guides, people who aren't fazed by the spectral dimensions of existence. Perhaps that's you. Now, before we go, if you want to know more about what I'm seeing for 2026, then sign up as a member of World Astrology Report on my website, because that will give you access to my full 2026 forecast live stream, in which I break down the major themes of the year transit by transit. Also, signing up gives you access to the bonus sections I include with almost all of my videos, including this one. In the bonus section, we look in more detail at the spiritual teachers whose charts are implicated by this eclipse and think about why their charts are getting pinged this year. Thanks for watching. If you want to know more about why I think a spiritual revival is coming this year and onwards, then you might want to watch this video next. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.